I became a manager of a real estate office years ago, and I called my friend Ian. I said, Ian, they just put me in charge. I'm in charge of about 20 real estate agents. What do I do? And Ian had just read, the Jack Welch book of how to be a CEO in 100 days. And he said, go in. Of course, he doesn't quote the book, Frank. He just tells me like it's his idea. He says, all right, Paxson, go in tomorrow and fire the bottom 10%. And I think there were 18 people in the office. And I thought, how am I going to fire 1.8 people? But I started with one.
That was the voice of Jeff Paxson, a friend of the program and Indiana's most notorious realtor. Also happens to be Ian's college roommate. And this is one of the best episodes we've done, in that Jeff tells us how he went from a college dropout to being an average realtor to becoming Indiana's #1 realtor in sales volume 5 years running. Fascinating episode for anyone who wants to start a business, to start a book of business, who's in sales, and just the kind of sacrifice that you have to make and the bold moves that it takes to be #1 at something. Hope you enjoyed as much as we did recording it.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God on the air.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you son of a bitch!
Hey, we got a guest, our second guest.
Oh, it's incredible. What a treat the world is in for today.
You, our listeners, you have no idea what a treat we have for you today. He may become he's been begging to get on an episode. It took him 37 episodes to get in here. We have the man, the myth, the legend. We've talked about him a million times on this podcast. Jeff Paxson, Mr. 4.5%, public enemy #1 in the realtor space in Indiana. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Ian, Frank, thank you guys. I love listening to the program. Congratulations on all your success.
Jeff says he's listened to at least 12% of 7 episodes that we have forwarded him out of 35. So we appreciate that. Would make him.
He's clearly a big fan.
That makes him our second biggest fan, aside from Nickel, so far. You haven't made it. And Nickel refuses to come on here because he still has a career that he cares about.
I do hope that you guys will have the impact on my career that you did on the 12-year-old interview the other day.
It's big. He's really taking off.
We're gonna convince you to buy some T-shirts.
Jeff,
that'd be a good idea.
Does it hurt your feelings, Jeff, that you are the second guest behind a 12-year-old from London that we never met before? Does that hurt your feelings?
I would have picked him. He
was just too adorable. You're an adorable guy. He was pretty adorable.
Say his name again for me.
Yanni Katz.
Oh, he was perfect. I actually did listen to that one all the way through.
Great kid. So for our listeners, to give a little introduction to who we are talking about, first and foremost, he is my old college roommate. But more importantly and more recently, Jeff Paxson is one of Indiana's most profitable realtors. In fact, from 2014 through 2018, Jeff Paxson was the #1 realtor in the state of Indiana, which is pretty incredible. And if you get to know his arc a little, really incredible the way he was able to go and do that. And for a lot of people that knew Jeff in college, that might have surprised them if you'd have told them that back then. Going back, and that's not an insult to you, Jeff, but excited to have you on here. For anyone who wants to start something on their own, start something from scratch, who wants to go all in, his story is a pretty powerful one of betting on yourself and in multiple ways. So, Frank, I'm going to start real quick. When's the first time I introduced you to Jeff? Because I have known Jeff for 25 years, but when's the first time I introduced the two of you?
Pax, do you remember?
Where a better place to meet than Detroit, Michigan, I think.
Right.
I
The
feel
first
like,
time we had the draft there.
yeah, the first time we had the draft, maybe a different trip before that, but what I thought was
Oh,
really,
that's right. We met it. So it was the summer of 2014, the baseball game. We went to,
Wasn't it spring training?
no,
no, he didn't come with us down there.
it was at Comerica, I think. But what I thought was really neat about the time that I met Frank was that Frank and I had never met. Ian does a good job of like I've never met Nickel, but I feel like I know him because Frank and Ian talk about him all the time. And so when I first met Frank, it was as though I already knew Frank, and it was as though Frank already knew me. And I remember we were walking down the street in Detroit in the middle of a day, and a young kid came up to us and was selling CDs, his demo CDs. And Frank said, he and I didn't really know each other, but Frank said, "Come on, Pax, let's go help this kid with his sales pitch." And so Frank pulls me over and Frank knew that I was a realtor, to my knowledge, but didn't know that I sold, or was, that was where I excelled. And he just immediately included me in what we took this 11-year-old kid trying to sell his demo CD on the streets of Detroit. And Frank was like, hey, get your shoulders back and tell us why we really need to buy this. And Pax, what do you got? And I said, I think you're doing great, but not afraid to talk to people. Keep it up, So it's that was my first real interaction with Frank, and it's been a joy ever since.
Oh, it's been a fun ride. And we're in a 4-man fantasy league. So if you're looking to get on this podcast, you probably need to join our fantasy league first. That's another. Yeah. So we've been playing fantasy for years together.
Importantly, there are 4 entry fees, but really it's like you're competing against 2 people. It's really like a 3-person competition with 4 entry fees. So we love having Jeff in our league contributing. He calls it the friendship fee that he pays once a year.
Friendship tax.
Each of these guys only have 2 children. When you get to 3 children, your fantasy skills really, really deplete. So that's a huge disadvantage. But
are we going too far afield to talk about the meat shits?
Oh dear. No inside jokes today, I don't think, Frank. Ian brought me on, and Frank and we were talking a little bit before the show about where I was at age 19 and 18 and 20. And I know those aren't in order, but to where I am now. And honestly, Ian and I, we were running around college campus and meeting people and being friendly. And what I didn't realize that I knew Ian was driven, but Ian was just hammering it out and going to school. And I was really just not interested in the classes that I was taking. I didn't have a goal as to what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so that made college really hard for me as far as from checking all the way in. There was years where I think my blood alcohol level was higher than my GPA. And in fairness, Ian's too, but Ian's blood alcohol level was really, really high. And so was his GPA. Mine was just lower. But and then also, just really what I used college for was to meet people. I didn't know this. I didn't have a plan. But what it taught me, and meeting guys like Ian and meeting guys like the other guys that we ran around with, was the world was bigger than where I lived. And that was a huge impact that I got from college. I just wish I had gotten out of there in a timely manner and with all the degrees I wanted. But what unfortunately happened was that I found myself at age 22 and Ian saying, "Get your ass back to class." And I'm saying, I don't know. It's not my thing. It wasn't because I wasn't smart. It just wasn't my interest. And then I found myself at age 22 and a half, working at a restaurant. No shame there, Frank. And then I started painting houses, and I really just wasn't proud of what my brand was. And I kind of got dared into going into real estate school, and I just.
Well, let's go start with, when you knew college. So Jeff was my roommate in a fraternity at Purdue University. What was your major?
Which semester?
Yeah. You changed a couple times. What was your last major?
I always say that I majored
Which
in
one were
English.
you most passionate about?
You and Neil were trading majors like baseball cards for a while there.
I would look over in the corner and whatever the most books I had, I'd be like, yeah, I think that's what I'll do this semester. I always say that my major was English. That was the class with all the girls in it, so that's what I kind of liked the most.
What did you think when you went to college you might do with a degree, or did you really were you kind of undecided when you came to college?
I was the guy that you guys have talked about before. I was the leader in high school, the fun, athletic comedian kid, and that's kind of how I'd gotten through school. I was smart. I didn't need to study. So I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I, wrestled with when maybe I was really good at high school. Maybe I'll be a teacher, but then I didn't think that would be the route that I would really embrace. So I just didn't know. I didn't know I really kind of enrolled it. It wasn't general studies, but it might as well have been. I just didn't love the intro classes.
Ian, let me ask him a different question. So as an older person who we tend to reflect more back on our lives. And if you ask me the same question, I can point to a moment that was way earlier than college. But my question is, when did you know that you were someone who was comfortable swimming against the tide or doing things that were not with conventional wisdom?
I haven't figured that out yet, but I mean, I don't know that I'm comfortable with it, but I know that I've certainly found myself in those spots a few times.
Did you embrace it before college or during college or after college? Like what?
A big part of my personality, Frank, is trying to be the guy that everyone likes. I would rather have you like me. I would rather have you like me than anything else. If that means being funny, if that means being sincere, if that means being genuine, if that means being, that was really important to me, was to be liked by the people. So going against conventional wisdom, I'm embarrassed about it. I'm still embarrassed about, my college career. I don't love to brag about it or anything. It was none of my friends in college or outside of college were going through it without a really good college degree or a good career that they were starting right as soon as they got out. And I was embarrassed by it. I was embarrassed that I was different than them. I wanted to get married. And so I kind of stumbled on a few guys that were doing real estate, and that I thought, well, wow, they are driving a nice car and their hands aren't dirty. And I wonder if I could do that. And so I went into real estate class, and I remember the first day, Pete Peterson was the sales licensed sales course instructor, Pete Peterson. And he said, opening line, he said, this is a career where if you do it well, you can make more money than a doctor and more money than an attorney. And it was a 6 or 9 week course. And I thought, okay, that's great. Well, then I found out immediately that that's true, but not guaranteed. And certainly a very small percentage of people really, really succeed in this business. So immediately I was 23 years old and had a real estate license, but I wasn't, they don't teach you how to sell and they don't teach you how to generate leads. So I was kind of learning the hard way, and trying to gain the trust of all of those people that Ian mentioned, that didn't think that I would ever amount to anything. It's hard to say, hey, well, can I be your realtor for life now? So then I had to really prove myself as a realtor. And a lot of times the way you prove yourself is not too different from what Yanni does, which is, his advertising. And I started by writing letters about myself and just little stories about myself to have people get to know me and have people to get to know that this is what I was doing for a living. And I did everything for the first time in my life, I did everything that they told me to do. And they, meaning the managers at my office.
And were you listening to them? So I think this is interesting. So were you listening to them because you saw that it was working? So was this the first time, you hadn't listened to teachers, you weren't listening to your peers that were students who hadn't done shit yet other than past classes.
Sure.
You listened to them because they were making money. You saw it was working. So it was like, all right, these are the first credible people that told me to do something,
Yeah.
I'm going to listen.
And I was kind of out of options. I mean, I felt like my other plans I'd kind of abandoned, and this was my way to have a career with a business card. And that was always like a big motivator to me. So I listened to him. And that was 01. And we fast forward, and I was doing it. And they would ask me to charge 7%, and I would. And they would ask me to, cold call people, and I would, because I felt like, first of all, this was also the first time in my life that I had, responsibilities and bills and things like that. So that was the driving factor. And I was a good soldier, and I had a good personality, and I would network. I've got a funny story for networking here in a second that Ian might remember, but I was really, really working hard at it because those guys were older and they'd done it. And they said, if you follow A, you will get to B.
So I'm interested in this because the bigger narrative for everyone growing up is get good grades in high school,
Go to
college, get a degree, get a good job, start your career. Those four things every parent in the country says. That's what you're going to do. You're going to go do it. Everyone that you're surrounded by growing up.
My kids, if you're listening to this, we still believe that. So we're doing that.
Yeah, you still believe that, right? So we talked about this. It always stressed me out because I love Jeff. He's a great friend of mine. He's a great talker. He taught me a lot about how to be social, how to go into a room and just start shaking people's hands. So naturally gifted at starting conversations. And I learned a ton from him just being, his friend, his roommate, watching the way he interacted. But I was always stressed for him when he just said, like, look, college isn't for me. And what's interesting, so we haven't even talked about this. Jeff didn't just leave college. He stayed in the fraternity house. So imagine being me. I had like 17 credits in mechanical engineering in one of the hardest years I had. I'm taking the thermodynamics. I'm taking these insane statistics classes. I had all of this fluid dynamics, all this stuff. And I'm getting up is before the sun's up to go to the library to study. And Jeff's still up listening to music, or he's, still partying, having a good time. He was just kicking back, having a good time. And this was my roommate who's not taking any credits and, just kind of hanging out. He didn't want to end the college experience, but he knew he was done with college. And I was always so stressed for you that you had just completely wiped out that safety net that we were all there to get. Cause I was still very much in the mindset of get a degree, get a good job, right? Sure. Engineering will pay more. You'll be marketable. That was the only option. So I didn't have a plan B. That plan A was that, right? Go get a good job at IBM or Ford or Procter and Gamble, whatever. And you just completely obliterated that and said, I'm going to figure out something else. And it stressed me out when we had these discussions. I would try to talk you into like, why don't you take a few credits? Maybe the major wasn't right. And you were always like, no, that's not it. I'm not going to do this.
To answer Frank's question, the way that Ian describes it is accurate, with the exception of I didn't have a plan either. So Frank, if I could go back to my 18 to 21-year-old self, I would say either go after, don't sit idle and party. Try to find what you like and then go after it. But I do think that finishing the course, and because I didn't have a plan either, Ian. I mean, my plan was no farther than I'm going to go cold call the dorms and see what girls will come over to the room tonight. That was my plan. I wasn't thinking past that afternoon or evening ever. And that was a shame. And it wasn't, I just grew up later. I didn't grow up until I was 22, 23. If I would have gone to college then, I would have graduated in 2 years.
How did you resist all that though? You had so many voices saying, get back in class, take college, and you just didn't buy it. You didn't buy the whole college concept.
I didn't find the thing that interested me. I just didn't. It was, if you remember colleges at Purdue, some of them were 300 to 600 people in the class. There was no way to stand out with personality. I couldn't succeed as well now in this virtual world of online classes or anything. I excelled the most in the classes where the teachers knew me and I answered questions and I interacted. I was better in a small group. And that again, just sort of by luck, was what real estate was. It was a small class.
I want to ask two
And
quick questions.
Yeah.
Quick questions. First question is this. So I asked you, when did you know you're someone who's comfortable swimming against the tide? And that really wasn't the right question. The right question might be this. When did you know your personality set you apart?
Early on. I heard you guys talk about this on a recent podcast, and you asked something about when did you know you were funny? And I knew that my personality set me apart. I remember third grade. I remember the teachers liking me, trusting me. I remember the kids turning to me to,
Be a leader.
be the leader. We graduated elementary school in sixth grade, and my mom was telling the story the other day that out of all the elementary schools, I was the sixth grade commencement speaker. All of these kids were going to go to junior high the next year, and I was immediately picked by my teachers, not because of my grades, but just because I could MC. I was known by every single incoming seventh grader at the end of May, who was the kid that gave the, hour-long commencement. And it was me. So I would say like third to sixth grade, but then really when I was in junior high, all of a sudden I was the only kid that everybody knew the name of the first day of school.
That's awesome.
And that went on. And then I was, the student body president when I was older. And a lot of it was just on personality. I was never in charge of the science club or anything like that. It was just on being nice and friendly and a little bit funny in the appropriate way. And the teachers knew me. And I was, like I said, I was really, really good at high school. I mean, that's my claim.
You were really, really good at college aside from the class part.
Yeah.
You were great at college.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
just part of the experience. Class is just part of the experience.
Frank, everyone knew this son of a bitch on campus, and he didn't even go to class. He would take when I had breaks and I'd come back for lunch, I'd come back to my room and my glasses and backpack would be missing. And he'd pull the books out, but he would take my backpack out on campus in Jeff's way of saying, I got to keep up appearances because no one knows I'm not in class. So there was this lie that we all lived. No one told any of the sororities that Jeff was actually dropped out a year ago. Everyone still thought he was going to class. So he would go out on campus and just walk around and say hi to people. Like, so he'd be seen, and he'd put my glasses to make it seem like he'd been reading.
Just stand on the corner there.
Yep,
Oh, yeah.
just to kind of keep it. But everyone knew Paxson. Every single person knew Paxson. He was just universally liked. No one disliked you either. He was just an inherently likable guy.
So let me ask this, Pax, because we kind of talked about you realized early your personality set you apart. You realized the school wasn't for you, and we could get into spinning tales of college hijinks for hours. But let's talk a little bit about real estate and when you got into it and when you decided to go forward. Is it a fair question to ask? Was it the first time you felt like you were pushed, maybe your back was against the wall, there was real consequences, and you respond? Like, is it a fair way to say it? Because like Ian asked you the question about why did you decide to listen for the first time? What was it? It was to me, there's always, and I don't say this in a way that's in any way disrespectful, but for me, when I've done incredible things, there's always a little bit of desperation or a little bit of survivability. So I'm curious if you kind of tapped into that and then you realized the way forward.
Well, all those stories in college that we talked about, that was a time when my mom and my dad stopped thinking that I was cute. They stopped thinking that was cute and funny. And so I was without a safety net, and on my own and on my own merit, and any dollar that was spent was going to have to be conjured up by me. And so, and also, one of the things that I had a college sweetheart, and all my buddies were getting married. All my buddies were getting a good job. And if I was going to keep up appearances, so to speak, I had to have a career. And so I was motivated by not being, again, back to, I wanted to be liked. And real estate was that. And my desperation to be liked by my peers and by my friends and their parents, I had to, put a tie on and go to work and have a business card. And that was a real big driving factor for me. And so, yes, I was, in my mind, I know that doesn't sound like desperate times, but in my mind, that was what my driving force was. So I got to those managers and they said, do this. And I did it.
So it's funny because in my life, I'm incredibly disciplined with many, many, many things.
Yeah.
Ian will immediately go to, you're not disciplined with the refrigerator, and he's correct. And in addition to that, I'm not very good at getting myself to the gym. Like, I will tell myself I want to get to the gym, but I literally have a trainer meet me at the house. And like, when I don't want to get out of bed, I know he's pulling up to the house in like 6 minutes and I got to get down there. He's going to be out front. So what I use the terminology is I have to get leverage over myself. And for me, leverage, I know how to do it. I know how to manipulate it. When I was in my 20s, I wasn't as good at it. But what you kind of walked into is, how do I get leverage over myself? And for you, I heard you say it. If I was an outcast, I probably wouldn't be as likable. And if I wasn't as likable, that would be devastating to me, because I'm not looked at as a professional. I can't fit into that crowd. And you're such a genuine guy. You couldn't have faked that. So you knew you had to show up and have a job in order to have the social credibility, which gave you all your juice.
Yep. That's exactly. And so Ian and Frank probably know this about me too. So when I got started, I hammered it out. I had to get started. Well, then, I mean, I'm still the same person that I was all my life. Then I got good at it. And then I kind of started doing some things. Well, now I'm a known brand. I can kind of get back on, I caught myself getting back on cruise control. By this time I was married and I was having kids, and then the real estate market got tough. And all of a sudden I had to kind of get back to the discipline that I had at the very beginning. And there was this real estate market crash of 08, 09. And believe it or not, in 2010, I had a house and two small children at home and a wife that was on maternity leave. And I had a rental house, and the tenant hadn't paid in 2 or 3 months. And I remember I had to borrow $1,000 from a buddy of mine to make the rental house payment. It was right around Christmas, blah, blah, blah. And that was in 2010. And I thought, here I am again, Paxson. And everything that I'd been doing was fine, except deals weren't closing. There was the mortgage crisis, the things that you guys have talked about on your show before. And for the first time in my real estate career, the house, just because you got the accepted offer, it didn't mean that the home was going to close. And so then I kind of had to recreate myself and my discipline, but I didn't do it on my own there. I got leverage over me, like you talk about. I put an ad out because I wanted an assistant. And what, God looking out for me, he sent a gentleman that had been at a crossroads in his life, had been a successful realtor in his career, very successful. I was selling 40 houses a year at my peak, and he was selling 200 houses a year. But he'd moved to Indianapolis to be near his daughters, and he had semi-retired at age 50. And he said, I think I can take you and build your business to what I had been doing in my market. And it was really, really controversial. At the time, like I said, I was charging 7% or 6%, just like all the people that liked me had said to do. And he said, I want you to take your commission structure from those percentages and start charging 4.5% to sell the house. And I thought, I called Ian, the engineer, and I asked him, that's less money, right? And he said, yeah, that is. And
Got my calculator out.
Hold on.
And,
you also skip math class.
That's right. Joe Musgrave is the gentleman's name, and his personality is what do we care what people think? And I thought, oh gosh.
Polar opposite. I mean, polar opposite personality to you.
Absolutely opposite.
You
Absolutely.
care about what everyone thinks. Yep.
So he said, we're gonna start advertising that this is what you'll charge, and we're gonna advertise it at an obscene amount. But I was desperate. I'd paid back my buddy the $1,000 by then, but I didn't want to suffer. And so I put some money into the advertising, and we started being pretty blatant about it. And we were at a big real estate firm that was not charging that. And they thought, well, this would be kind of cute for right now, but we think that we can train him back to charging more, let him just get his feet under him. And I quickly became the number one broker in that 100 agent office, and then the number one broker in Indiana for Keller Williams. And then
So real quick, so you're at Keller Williams. They are the big dog of all of Indiana. There's 100 agents in this office, of which 99 are charging 6 to 7%, and one is charging 4.5%, with the same branding, the same office, the same logo, the same everything, except your ads are undercutting all of them. And so I imagine very quickly people started asking the other agents, why are you charging more than, are you guys at 4.5 now? I heard you're 4.5. And all these realtors had to then explain themselves. No, we're not 4.5, we're 6. That was just a one-time promotion from Paxson or whatever. So how quickly did the other 99 start getting pissed at you or calling you and saying, what are you doing?
There was grumbling right away. Well, Frank's business, the way he generates leads is through advertising. And 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when I started advertising what I charge. At that time, realtors were not advertising what they charge. You found that out on the appointment. So I was in their face. I mean, I was on every grocery cart in our suburb here. I was back on the back of the phone book. I had television commercials. I was blatant about it. Mr. 4.5%. And it wasn't like I was doing it in a cute, quiet way. So that immediately the industry outside of Keller Williams turned on me. And part of the reason we kid and say that I'm public enemy number one. And then the inside core, my 100 agent office, they were, would get complaints from the guys outside. They would get complaints from their clients. Why don't you charge what he's charging? I thought he works there. I finally pissed off the right person. And there was this lady, and I used to call her Big Red, and she was the head of that Keller Williams office, along with 2 other people. And the 2 other people had gone to bat for me for a long time, but I ended up having one of her past clients work with me. I didn't know that it was her past client, and it wasn't anything illegal. Her past client called me. They were not in a working relationship at the time, and she just made it her absolute mission to get me out the door at Keller Williams.
And realtors live on me. You make a living on someone's going to buy 3 to 5 houses in their life, and you're going to get all of them if you do a good job on the first one or a referral. So when someone has worked with Big Red for 2 commissions and the third then goes to someone in her office, it's sacrosanct. I mean, that doesn't happen, right? It just doesn't happen unless you really piss someone off.
It was a big deal. Yeah. And she had not done anything, in my opinion, I mean, the client told me some things, but she'd not done anything to lose the business. But I will say that I was younger and a different generation, but mainly how much
she wanted a deal. She wanted a deal. She wanted to save some money.
Yeah. Yep. And so Big Red kind of started headhunting because I hadn't done anything to not deserve to be there, but my volume was growing. I told you guys that I sold 40 houses the year before I switched to what I charge now. And this was 4 to 5 years into what I was charging. And by that time I'd sold in a single year, 370 houses in 1 year.
And what did that do? I mean, so when you're selling 40 houses in the year, you're barely scraping by. 370 houses, even less per house, you're making a ton of money.
Yeah, 40 I think is 40 was six figures, but not quite.
What was the average sales price, Pax? What was the average sales price?
175 to 200.
Okay, I'm going to use 185 for the numbers. Keep going.
Okay, and so what happened was I grew so quickly that in volume and units that things would fall through the cracks. My customer Ian Matthews or Frank Cava may call the office and not get a call back right away, or but mainly if Frank Cava, the other real estate broker from the other company, he definitely wasn't getting a call back right away. There was no income in me telling Frank, what the utilities are for that listing. I mean, figure it out yourself, Frank. And I got a little not big for my britches. I just couldn't handle I was working till 11 at night to sell those 370 houses.
And people were sort of getting what they paid for. Knowing you weren't making as much per house, you didn't have the time to give them as much love per house.
They weren't riding in the car with me and we weren't going out to dinner. And we used to say, at the time, people would ask that. They would say, well, Jeff, I mean, and we would say, if you think that Jeff's going to be at your Super Bowl party, he's probably not. If you want a realtor to be your friend, you'll like Jeff and he's friendly, but he's not going to be that handholdy. And I'll tell you, that's totally against my old business plan. I used to go to 4 Super Bowl parties a Super Bowl Sunday to go touch hands and be friendly with everybody. But the volume got so big and the number of clients got so big that I lost that personal touch.
So this is where I was starting at with going against the tide. So let me come back to it. You had to change the fabric. There was probably a point in your time where you would have rather gone to 4 Super Bowl parties than do 375 deals. Why did that change?
Hats off to Mr. Musgrave. What he said would happen did, all the way down to I said, well, what are the other realtors going to think? Because I was apprehensive. He said, well, are they paying your mortgage? And I thought, no, they're not. So he got me into a position of being uncomfortable, and it worked.
And what I heard is necessity, really, Jeff. When you got to borrow $1,000 from a friend, that's embarrassing. You've got a third kid on the way. You've got a wife, a house, a mortgage, and you don't even have money to cover a month's rent for a tenant. What I heard is you were forced into changing. So Joe came along at a time where you were kind of down on yourself and feeling like I'm going to let some people down that I care about here. I need to make some big changes because I'm just skating along. I'm not growing.
Yeah. Absolutely. That was a big, so in order to get from where I was, I had to get uncomfortable. I still don't love that, Frank. I mean, I still don't like, I pride myself. I do, even at 370 deals, I still know the people. I still know them. I meet every customer. I just don't always know their kids' names and things like that. But people do come up to me all the time, or when I get repeat business, which is another big part of my business.
I think this is important though, Jeff. Jeff, talk about how sacred that 6%. I mean, I feel like realtors have been holding on to that for decades, even though their value goes down less per client with technology. You can go find prices now. You can go get the listings yourself. A lot of places you can get into and see yourself. So it's
cheaper to advertise now.
The contracts are all boilerplate. It's cheaper to advertise. So the value that a realtor can actually give versus 30 years ago is much less. But they're all holding on to making the same percentage. Talk about how just sacred that number is in the realtor community. I feel like realtors are scared to death of that compression happening and their livelihoods changing.
Especially the old guard, the suits. The guys that have been doing this for 40 years and are in charge of brokerages, they get, if Ian or Frank make a sale, they get a portion of it, the top portion. So that was, I've had companies, people in companies come up to me and say, Jeff, we I just left a sales meeting at our brokerage where we had all of your marketing material on the table. And we just had a whole meeting on how our brokerage was going to combat what you were doing. I would go on appointments, and I've had sellers that I met with say, the guy that just left here said that you're a convicted felon. And it's not true. Alleged. No, it wasn't remotely true. But, I mean, these guys were so hanging on that what they charged, because that was what they were taught and what I was taught too. But they would say the nastiest things. They would say that I was going out on my wife. They would say that I was getting kicked out of the business. They would say all these horrible things that weren't true, all because of they were angry about what I advertised that I charged.
And Joe told you that was going to happen because it happened to Joe. He told you all of that would happen, and you still had to go do. He told you will be hated. People will lie about you. They will make up stories. They will do everything they can.
I was the president of the Realtor board when we started doing this. And I told Joe, I said, that may have happened to you, Joe, but they like me. They like me. And the truth was they didn't. They liked me when I was like them.
They liked you until you were a disruptor. And as soon as you became a disruptor, they disliked you.
Yes.
Frank and I were talking about we did a whole episode on Jeff Bezos and Amazon, and a lot of what you did, Bezos was hated by book publishers when he started getting into digital, when he started making everything cheaper, because Bezos, like you, focused on what customers wanted. You grew volume because you gave customers what they wanted. They said, a portion of customers said, we don't see a ton of value in being friends with our realtor. We just want to save some money and sell our house or help us buy a house. And you said, I'm going to service you and give you what you want. But it pissed off everyone else. So all those other realtors, to me, were like all the book publishers that were slandering Amazon because Bezos wanted to give them what they want. And what happened to Bezos? He got all the volume because he gave customers what they want. He wasn't a pig about what he did.
Right. And that was, we always knew that units would take care of itself.
Let me ask you this question. So you started this in 2010, 2011, right?
Yeah.
I have a feeling I know the answer, but was the broader context of the market on your mind, or was it basically survivability for Jeff?
It was definitely that I was going on appointments and asking to charge 6 and 7%, and the people owed as much or more than what the home was worth at those times. If you think Frank will know those years really what sold in the mortgage business. So there was a big need to the customer for that savings. I was saving each family on average $5,000, $5,500 a house, and
$170,000 house. That's a big deal for those folks.
Yeah, huge. If I went up to you and I said, I'll sell your house in the same amount of time, with the same amount of marketing, but you get to keep 5,000 of it, deal. And so that was a big reason for the volume.
Even just qualifying for the mortgage, Jeff. I mean, I haven't been in that business. We were always fighting to try to scrape together 1% reserves, a few months of, reserves just to qualify for a government loan. When you can cut that cost down, that's the difference between qualifying or not with some people.
And how many times, Frank, does a negotiation between a buyer and a seller come down to $3,000 to $5,000?
So
always,
it's a small number. That number makes a big difference. So there was a point in my career when I had a conversation with my mom, school teacher, right? Yeah. And I had to fire a bunch of people. And she asked me if I felt bad. And I said, yeah, I do. I feel bad. I feel terrible. I was like, but I've come to the realization that if I don't do it, I will be the one being fired. And what happened was, a friend of mine uses this quote all the time. He's like, self-preservation is undefeated. And even though your main driver is likability, being friendly, and doing things with people, there's that uncomfortable point in time. It's kind of like when you're changing the gear on a bike. There's that crunch. That crunch was going from 6% to 4.5%. But once you got there and kind of got comfortable and got into the new gear, you settled into, I'm getting deals, I'm providing value, I'm allowing people to do things they couldn't have done before, I'm preserving myself and my family. And I ran the numbers. On 7.4 in volume, charging 3%, your cut's 222 before marketing, before anything. On 185, on 375 deals, that's roughly 70 million in volume, 10 times the volume. At 1.5%, you're making over $1 million. Now that's before marketing, everything like that. But those are the kind of things that you start to look at and you're like, wow, that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
And I think what's missed is there's service there. You did this at a point in time where $5,000 mattered. Like it really mattered.
Big time.
Yeah, I mean, the difference there is being liked and swimming in the same lane as everyone else and barely scraping by and being in trouble if another recession hits, or making 5 times the revenue and not being liked in some circles, which truthfully, those aren't people you were inviting to your Super Bowl parties.
Correct.
Your friends are not realtors. Your friends are coaches of Little League football. They do other things. Your friends are not realtors.
Correct.
I think it's a distinguishable point, Ian, that we should talk about for a second. Like I was having an interview this morning with someone who's in traditional real estate, and we have a really good reputation, but we do non-traditional real estate. We do things that other people don't do. Our service is often for people who can't afford to sell their house retail. Like they won't even go to Jeff because it's fallen apart or something like that.
Yeah.
We service a different part of the market, but we still treat them like human beings. We're still friendly. We're still good to them. If we sign a contract, we do what we say we're going to do, and we provide value. And what I think has to happen in some instances is you have to kind of disenfranchise yourself to what other people think you need to do, and you need to do what the market says you need to do. And I think what's a repetitive theme in this podcast is that you didn't go the traditional route in elementary school through high school. You didn't go the traditional route in college. You didn't go the traditional route this way. That's the theme. But the theme was always, I want to be likable. I want to do things for others. And you are. It's just, there's some people who are pissed, but you can't please everybody. And you kind of get to that point in your life.
And I'm a little more comfortable with that now, Frank, but it
takes time.
So you asked, when did I realize that? And I was like, maybe just now.
Yeah. So talk about the top dog realtor you snatch up one of her customers and all hell breaks loose. So at this point, how long had you been Mr. 4.5%? I mean, his ads literally, he started calling himself Mr. 4.5% in quotes. It's amazing. Like you could not have been more brazen and in your face about it. You did not, when you decided to do this, it was kind of like when Hulk Hogan turned over to NWO, went heel and went with the black beard and Hogan leaned into being the heel. You leaned into being the enemy immediately. Mr. 4.5 is not, it's not just touching your toe in the water.
Yeah. Frank, my receding hairline, my suntan, and my body weight are all Hogan-esque, you know.
We weren't going to get into your prep for this.
Very switched it up. So how long were you Mr. 4.5 before Keller Williams said, you got to get the hell out of here?
2 years. 2 years I'd been under their regime and as Mr. 4.5, and it just
talk about how it blew up. Talk about how it all blew up. How you got kicked out.
Part of the volume was, stuff would fall off the plate. So I've sent an ad out that I sent it to a whole neighborhood, but it didn't say if your home is being advertised by another broker, this is not intended as solicitation. So I got taken down to the
so let this is what I'm a realtor, so this makes sense to actually have a second here. Like this is sacred. Like you in the realtor world, you must disclose this. And if there's ever another realtor involved, like on all my advertisements, all of them, we put, this is not a solicitation for your business if you're represented by a realtor, because you can get like it's almost like a perjury charge if you're an attorney. Like you just cannot do this.
All my ads before that had said that, all my ads after, but they got a complaint that they could get me into grievance.
You were sloppy. It was just sloppy. Just got missed.
Yeah. And so, and off it went. And of course, the protocol is the realtor's supposed to call, see if we can settle the dispute on our own. But of course, that was probably a realtor that didn't get called back right away either. And so I end up in the grievance committee down at the Board of Realtors. And that was enough for Big Red to say, listen, he's.
They were looking for an excuse, and you
Yeah.
were somehow sloppy. You gave it to them.
And unlike in the fraternity house, you didn't know someone who was the grievance chairman.
I wasn't roommates with the grievance chairman. So, that was how I always
Jeff got out of a lot of fines in the fraternity because I was grievance chair.
Whoopsie daisy. Yeah, no. So, keep in mind, the grievance committee down at the Board of Realtors, they were also ready to try 4.5, Mr. 4.5. So I got a $500 fine, but more than that, and that was the culmination. But Keller Williams was just like, hey, we've hit an impasse here. I was bringing them in income, but not compared to the headache they were facing, which was the calls from the agents in the office, calls from outside agents to them saying like, hey, we can't compete and blah, blah, blah. So what was kind of cute was they ushered me out, and it's, I want to say on May 9th of 14, they asked me to move that week. And I had 70 listings, and I had 40 pending transactions, and it was the busiest month of the year, and I had to start a company that week. And otherwise, I probably wouldn't have left. If you ever said, Paxson, I would have just been content and chugging along at Keller Williams.
Did Joe predict this was going to happen with Keller? Did he say at some point they will kick you out and you'll have to do this on your own?
Yes.
And you
definitely.
thought you could smooth talk that? You disagreed with him?
Joe didn't want to go to Keller Williams in the first place.
So he wanted you to start immediately with your own LLC, your own team, get rid of Keller. And why didn't you? Why didn't you listen to that at the beginning and just say, if I'm going to do this, I'm all in from the beginning? Just again, safety net. Familiar?
Net, and it's fun. It was fun working at a big office like that.
Yeah.
We would have, pitch ins and all that stuff, and that was important to me.
So I want to go into this, Ian, real quick. So, hopefully nobody from the legal department of Keller Williams listens to this. We'll have to remove this podcast, but
no one listens to this podcast.
I know. That's why I feel comfortable going out on a limb here. I got kicked out of Keller Williams too. Like they did the same thing to me that they did to you. And Keller Williams is a fun place, and it's the right place for a lot of people, but for people that live on the fringe like you and I, it's the wrong place.
Which is funny, Frank, because Gary Keller, the head,
he's on the fringe.
He's on the fringe.
That's right.
But everybody below.
He promotes it, but he's the guy who owns it, so he gets to do it where other people don't. But one of the things that I think is critical is this. Like, could you have did you lose anything tangibly besides time and just heartache, or were you able to make that shift when you had to do it?
The biggest thing was I had just bought 100 new signs that said Keller Williams on it, and I had to buy another 100 that said Jeff Paxson team.
You were fairly fortunate. There was probably some soft costs we're not factoring in, like time.
I did lose. If we're really grinding axes here, Keller Williams did, call my current listings. They own the listings as the broker, and some of them stayed there.
Right.
At which of course they honored the percentage I was charging, but yeah, so I lost some income on the switch, but after that, that was when the following year was when I went to the 375 houses.
Let's get granular though, Frank. This is fun. So he's booted out of an office. He's having the biggest month of his entire life. He has 1 week to start a company. You've never done this. This is not your forte, the administrative side of starting a business. You have to form an LLC. You probably had to get an attorney. You had to get your own bank. Like, who's helping you do all this? I'm trying to picture you actually doing this. Having worked on deals with you, Frank and I are well aware of your administrative skills.
Get an attorney.
How did you pull all this off in a week?
Get a bank account.
It took a month.
I had a cordless phone. We were about a 3 or 4 man office, and it took a minute to get we didn't have an office. So I went out, and one day I went down, set up an LLC, and set up my membership with the Board of Realtors, and we rented a house that was on a main thoroughfare, and put a decent sized sign up that said what we charge. And but then it was like, 3 to 4 weeks to get a phone system in. So we were walking around the rooms with a cordless phone, like, hold on just a second, Mr. Matthews. Jeff Paxson Real Estate. This is Jeff. How can I help you? Oh, you've got a call for Frank? Yeah, 1 moment, please. Hey, Mr. Matthews, can I give you a call back? And I would, oh, okay, I sure will. Thanks. And I'd click over and I'd say, Sally, it's Frank Cabo on the phone. And then if you get a call, I'm expecting a call back from Mr. Matthews, and we would walk it around like a house phone. We didn't have a phone. We had a crate set up in the living room. It was really crazy how it started, but I wouldn't have been able to do it if I ever was like, all right, guys, in 1 year, we're going to move. I never would have moved. The only way I was going to move is
the only way that could work for Jeff was you were kicked out and you had no choice.
If you guys asked me to go to dinner in Chicago and you asked me 2 months ahead of time, I would have probably said, I don't know, I'm probably busy that weekend. But you asked me the day before and I meet you guys in Chicago. And that's just kind of, that's, I don't know, a little bit how I run, but
so
I'm not a planner.
So the goal here is for everyone not to live with their hair on fire, even though it does motivate most of us. What I was driving at with the Keller Williams thing is this. It was the wrong fit for me from jump. It was the wrong fit from you when you made that change. Yep. And both of us are, I'm probably a little bit more proactive than you. And I still had to get booted before I left. But what I've started to learn about with myself and when I've gotten truth in what I do business-wise is you get ahead of that stuff. Like you got to find the brokerage where I work now, 2 or 3 times a year, I get in trouble. He's got my back. If he ever needs anything from me, he knows I do it. It's just sometimes you settle for the wrong relationship because it's easy. But if you're going to live on the fringe, the thing you must have is the support. You have to. Like you can't be you're already on the fringe. It's not like you be on the fringe and you have no support. You got to have that back office.
Jeff was undercutting realtors. Frank got kicked out because he was eating everyone's lunch in the refrigerator at Keller Williams.
I remember.
That was the straw. That was the straw. It was too much.
The guys that support me, honestly, are you two. You guys have been great for my career and my business and a great sounding board for me. Joe Musgrave at my office has been absolutely, without a doubt, take a bullet. I mean, he allows me to still be the guy. Like I'm always like at work, like, hey, it's fine by me, but let's see what Joe says. Like, and I mean,
he's your bad cop. He's your bad cop. He's your bad cop.
He's
got to have that.
He's the best.
Hey, Jeff, tell me, Big Red though. So you leave, she still hates you and she's still lingering and still trying to slander you at every chance. Talk about how that progressed once you had the Jeff Paxson team on your own.
Hey, to keep you out of trouble, Pax, we're going to go back in post-production and instead of calling her Big Red, we're going to call her Big Gretch.
Big Gretch, that sounds wonderful. Yeah. So what was my favorite story was, I still had friends at Keller Williams, but my favorite was when I hadn't put anything on the Keller Williams building, what I charged, but when we got our own building and I think I've shown it to Ian.
This is great, Frank. This is great.
Jeff Paxson Real Estate across the top. Sell your home for 4.5%. And it's near the busiest McDonald's drive-through in the city. And so it's just seen by all hours of the day and it lights up at night. And reportedly people went back to the Keller Williams sales meeting and said, did you see the sign he put up? Now I had a little bit of an advocate there. Big Gretch was not her, but I had a little bit of an advocate there on the ownership panel. And she said, what did you think he was going to do? We had him a little bit corralled here.
Yeah.
So that was neat. And
there were people within Keller, Frank, that were saying the devil we know that we control is better than if we make an enemy. He's really going to go out. And so Jeff went and put his sign on Keller Williams, pretty much right by Keller Williams building. So Big Gretch had to drive by it every day to the office. This huge picture of Paxson, Mr. 4.5, the big smile on his face. And he did it on purpose where he put the location for sure.
It was, and it's been a multi-million-dollar sign. I've been thrilled about it.
And so you're the number one realtor from 2014 to 2018. That's an awesome run. So, you go from dropping out of college, not knowing what you're going to do after we're all getting jobs, making great money and you're working in a restaurant to you're number one for 5-6 years, working your ass off, closing 350 to 400 homes a year. Why weren't you number one in 2019 or 20?
Well, I'm on my side of town. My sale price is not as high as the north side guys, so that's dropped me. I'm consistently top 3, top 5. I still am gonna brag, and I've been the number 1 realtor in my hometown and my home county for the last 10 years. So but it's just hard to compete with the sale prices of the north side. And I also had to, in order to do 350, 370 units, I was not a very good dad during those years. So my kids were getting older, and I just started reprioritizing. Like most of my schedule today is real estate, but then beginning at 4:30, 5:30, it starts to be, my son's got a track meet, and then baseball practice, and my daughter's got cheerleading practice, and I'm just really, the last 3 to 5 years, 4 years, I've been focused on being a way better dad, and that's worked great too.
Which is awesome. I mean, being number one is great, but it comes with a price. It comes with a price, and if the price means, Frank, 90% of the text messages I get from Jeff are pictures and videos of his kids playing baseball and football, and he's sitting there in the front row at cheerleading competitions, which I would never pictured Jeff doing 20 years ago, but he's there and he's cheering and he's excited. So I love that, because we talk about balance all the time and what it's all worth, and there's a price to pay.
You guys obviously recognize that I've not put any more time into my fantasy football career, so I'm not splitting time between that.
Thankfully, that's not been where you've transferred those hours.
I've got 2 stories, guys. Because I know you've got me on a time limit, rightfully so. I've got 2 quick stories that I think really relate to let me speak to a manager, and I'd love to tell them if I could.
Yeah.
The first one was I became a manager of a real estate office years ago, and I called my friend Ian. I said, Ian, they just put me in charge. I'm in charge of about 20 real estate agents. What do I do? And Ian had just read, the Jack Welch book of how to be a CEO in 100 days. And he said, go in. Of course, he doesn't quote the book, Frank. He just tells me like it's his idea. He says, all right, Paxson, go in tomorrow and fire the bottom 10%. And I think there were 18 people in the office, and I thought, how am I going to fire 1.8 people? But I started with 1. Young man, get in here. He'd had a killer year right before, and then this year, last year and a half, it's just been lousy. His priorities were different, yada, yada, yada. And I sat him down. And
for the record, this took you 1 year to actually do this, for the record, from the time we had our initial discussion. It took you about a year.
I psyched up the whole night. I think you got me all psyched up, and I'm ready to, fire this guy, just like my manager expert told me to do. And I brought him in, sat him down, and I fired him. We had a conversation for about 45 minutes to an hour. Stood up, shook his hand, had him leave the office. And he was, goes out to his car. It was around lunchtime. He goes out to his car and he starts driving away, and he calls back and he says, hey, Jeff, it's so-and-so. And I said, hey, so am I like fired? And I was like, no, were you not listening? You're gonna be. If you don't get in here tomorrow with a new spirit and a new attitude, that's what could happen. That you are not fired, though. You are not fired. It's weird that you even got that out of that conversation. I'll see you tomorrow, buddy.
And then you call me and you go, this went terribly wrong. What did I do wrong? I'm like, everything. You did everything wrong. Why didn't you say yes?
No, you are not fired. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah. So that's the let me speak to him. That was when I knew I needed Let Me Speak to a Manager podcast 10 years ago. And then, the other one is my old networking. I was a young kid realtor. My friend Ian had just gotten married to his beautiful wife, Jenny. And we had the rehearsal dinner in Chicago the night before the wedding. And I was so thrilled that I had business cards. I'm going to see all my friends from college, and I got business cards. And I mean, I would hand them to anybody.
That didn't say Applebee's. For once, you had a business card that didn't say Applebee's.
It was great. And so I'm handing out business cards. Hey, Mr. Suzula, how you doing? Jeff Paxson. I'm a realtor. I've not sold a house. I've not sold a house. Mr. Matthews, Mrs. Matthews, Jeff Paxson. If you ever need a real estate need in Bargersville, Indiana, I am your guy. And so I'm handing it out all over. Homeless people up and down the streets of Chicago. Well, then what a powerful weapon to hand out, a picture of myself with my phone number on it to girls. And I thought it's my glamour shot picture too, on top of this is what I could look like.
Good angle, good lighting. Yeah.
Similar to today. And so I handed it out to this girl, I start getting phone calls for 3 or 4 days from this girl. I thought, oh dear, take a hint, lady, take a hint, stop calling me. I'm just pressing ignore. But we had our moment, and she calls on a Tuesday in the middle of our sales meeting. And I'm the young kid at this very small office. And Deidre, the secretary, comes in. She says, Jeff, there's a call from, call her Susie. She says it's really, really important. I'll send her to the phone. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, she's called my office line. And hello?
This is a random girl, Frank, that Paxson met in a bar the night before my wedding.
She says, hello? I said, hello? She says, hey, Jeff, it's Susie, or whatever, what I said her name was, Susie. I'm sorry, I've been trying to get a hold of you. My sister and my brother-in-law are trying to buy a house right there in Indianapolis. Would you be interested in helping them? I'm like, yes. Hey, how's it going? Great. I'm so glad you called. I thought you were, my cell phone must not be working. Thank you. And so that was, if that wasn't my first sale, it was my second, Frank. I mean, that was my networked my way from Chicago to Ian's rehearsal dinner to Indianapolis. And that was my first sale so always take every phone call as another let me speak to a manager lesson.
Hysterical. Always work your leads.
Yes. Never hesitate to work that lead to the finish. Guys, I don't know if this accomplished what you wanted, but I had an absolute blast. I cannot wait to rub it in Nichols' face that I made it on here. Yes.
I think you did a fine job. It's amazing that we wrapped this up in less than an hour and 10. I was certain it was going to go over 2 hours, and I was going to have to change the rest of my days.
I was afraid you guys were going to have me dress. I did have my little my Godfather gear here. Here's the Public Enemy magazine that they put out here. Public Enemy #1.
Oh man, that's big time.
If we were doing the Godfather episode, I was all dressed for it there. It's been something I've had to embrace, but I really could not have done it without you guys always coaching me and pulling me along. I appreciate all your help. And I do love your podcast. I kid about it, but I want you to know that I really do listen. So hopefully you press like or subscribe. And
one thing knowing about you, you will listen to this episode at least 20 times. You do like to hear your own voice more than anyone I've ever met in my life.
I love it. Hey, I love you guys. I'm proud of you. And tell your families I said hi.
Hey, we appreciate you, Paxson. Great job today. We're proud of you.
Thank you.
Good job, buddy. It was great to see you. We gonna close it or is that it?
I think I just did, didn't I?
Yeah. Do I have the first pick in the draft?
I'm not the best color man in the business for nothing, folks.
Yeah, you can have the first pick in the draft. We're absolutely certain you'll F it up and we'll be fine after you. You're the one person I can always give the #1 pick to and know it's good.
Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz is off the board. He's off the board.
You'll kill it. See you, Pax.
Go Colts. See ya.